Hello everyone, it's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland reviewer, and I'm here to review Eddington, which is a new neo-western dark comedy thriller from Ari Aster, the creator of Hereditary, Midsommar, and Beau is Afraid. And this film focuses on, in May of 2020, a standoff between a small-town sheriff and mayor sparks a powder keg as neighbor is pitted against neighbor in Eddington, New Mexico. And this film is very different than what you would expect from Ari Aster. And his last three films have a lot of very supernatural and abstract elements to it, very horror focused. And this is very different. There are some horrifying things and thrilling things in this film, but much more grounded in the tension between people versus people and humanity. And thinking about this is an excellent film from a directorial standpoint. That it moves for a 2.5 hour film. There's something just so engrossing about how this film is shot. And as the film goes on and more complex elements of the story come in, Darius Khondji's cinematography stands out more and more. And there's a climactic shootout, a la very Western kind of shootout, but turned up to 11 because you can tell Ari Aster's kind of playing around with expectations and conventions of the Western genre throughout this film. But there is moments that put you on edge so much because how the camera moves around, and it shows Ari Aster actually knows a lot about action and directs some killer action in this film, which makes me kind of want to see him do some more action movies, which is kind of wild leaving this film and thinking about that. And also, the Haxon Cloak and Daniel Pemberton work together to craft this score that is very atmospheric, but also times leaning into Western motifs. And that's one of the most interesting and impressive and impactful things about this film is how Aster is able to work within Western motifs and elements and themes and ideas and explore that in a modern context and in during the pandemic and the rioting of Black Lives Matter protests and all of these things that keep spilling out. And this film, from a technical standpoint, is excellent. There's so many great moments with high tension, and also there's some really funny moments in this film too that had the whole audience laughing out loud at. And Aster is able to inject that dark humor in there as well. You have a story that tries to tackle way too much. And a lot of the commentary on COVID and the pandemic and Black Lives Matter protests all felt like it was just ripped from Twitter. And it made it hard to really buy into hey, this is something really interestingly written. No, it's just I've seen tweets like this. And it's just drawing upon those kinds of things and feels a little on the nose. But the way that Aster explores social media and technology and how it's leveraged to deconstruct society and our mental health is so impactful throughout this film. That's one of the most engaging elements of this film that he's able to explore and adds layers and makes this film more dynamic. And you're going through some wild stuff throughout this story as this spirals into murder and QAnon, child trafficking, conspiracy theories, and how this film leverages conspiracy theories of these very specific characters that it does. I do feel like the film's not focused enough, and some of these characters feel very much like an afterthought and feel like they're tacked on extra elements. There's this cult leader that shows up that's drawing our main character Joe Cross, the sheriff's wife, away from him. Feels like such a not fully realized element to this story, and it just feels well, we talked about pandemic, we talked about Black Lives Matter, we have to talk about QAnon conspiracies, right? And it's just trying to tackle too many things at once in this film. But as this film gets into its second act and really into its third act, it kicks into gear and becomes absolutely thrilling and has some really biting commentary. It has very intense action sequences and shocking twists and turns along the way. This film gets a lot more complicated than you expect. And Joaquin Phoenix is anchoring this whole thing down right at the center. He is by far the main character, and he's complicated. Like, he wants to be a nice guy. He doesn't want to put up with these COVID regulations, and it's very much like he's representing specific elements of MAGA supporters, but also he has this complexity with his wife and their dynamic and their relationship, and he goes to some dark places and takes this film into some crazy places. And how his story all comes together in the end is shocking, but also so fitting and uncomfortable. And it feels very satisfying to the journey he goes on. There's a lot of other characters here, and Pedro Pascal plays the mayor, and he's in a lot less than you might expect. But when he is, he really stands out in his way of being like all smiley and nice one minute, but also kind of a dick in moments where he's being more of himself, and you see that like two-faced, hypocritical kind of politician that he's playing. And Emma Stone doesn't get a whole lot to work with in this film, and she's very much like anxious and distant most of the time, and she also doesn't get that much screen time in this film either. Austin Butler plays his like cultist character, and he's in for a couple scenes, and he plays it well. Deirdre O'Connell, who's the overbearing mother-in-law to Joaquin Phoenix with all of her conspiracy theories, is wild. Luke Grimes as one of his like deputies, who is very much like that cop kind of character, and you have Michael Ward, who plays another cop, a black man, and he has a very interesting context to the rest of the film. And like Cameron Mann, who plays this young man who's just trying to get laid by, doing social justice stuff with this young woman, and like where his character goes is wild by the end, and the commentary and the references they leverage this character for. This is a wild film, and Astor's unhinged as a filmmaker, and you can really see that here. But there's elements that, it feels a little too on the nose and doesn't have enough new things to say about certain things that make it feel like I'm just getting, tweets read to me from social media. But there's so much from a technical standpoint, genre elements to this film, the cast, and just as this film escalates, it gets so much more engaging. It's clunky. It's overstuffed. It has too much going on. And it's an imperfect film, but it has a lot of potential and a lot going for it as well. But those are my thoughts on Eddington. Let me know what you think, and let's talk some movies. But thank you as always for tuning in and supporting your Wasteland reviewer.